So thank you very much, everybody, for listening today, and for the study group of Roman pottery for giving me the opportunity at this really special conference. And I know James and Aniko have done an absolutely fabulous job of organising. I'll be talking today about the dating and distribution of a late Roman pottery fabric named Portchester D. But it's also kind of a brief overview of the problems that come about when looking at late Roman pottery. Um, oh, sorry. So what is Portchester D? Well, I'm calling it Portchester D, and it's Port for short, which is the fabric code, but it is a bit confusing. So basically, it's a Roman corseware fabric. It is quite coarse, actually. It's quite a hard and sandy pottery fabric, and typically it's got a white and cream slip. You do get variations in colour, but the most common and diagnostic form is this white and cream colour. It's said to be a periphery product of the Alice Holt and Farnham pottery industry, and production of this type dates from the early 4th century to the end of the 4th century. And the major pottery industries are said to kind of collapse at the end of Roman Britain with the economic decline. Pottery industries stop all output. We get a gradual decline in material culture. In 1950, there was kilns identified just outside of Alice Holt at Tilford, at a place called Overwey in Tilford. This is why this fabric is also known as Overwey White Ware in the National Roman Fabric Collection. It's also included in the Tilford group in the Lyon and Jeffreys Alice Holt report of 1979. Lyon and Jeffreys also mention a similar fabric being produced at the same time called Surrey buffware. This Surrey buffware is now considered to be the same. Portchester D comes from Fulford's analysis of the pottery from the Portchester Castle excavations. I'm choosing to call it Portchester D throughout this, and like I say, I might refer to it as Port. We get in the late Roman period, the pottery industries decrease the range of vessels that they make, said to be possibly better for mass production, easier to send out to a wider network. So the principal vessel forms of Portchester D, we have neck jars, flange bowls, and plain dishes. These are the three main forms. This is a lovely example of an almost complete Portchester D vessel found in Walthamstow in London. This was sent to me kindly by Aniko and Pre-Construct. And you can see the white slip, the white cream slip, and it's heavily suited on the outside. So Lyon and Jeffreys in their report, they pointed out one of the diagnostic features of Portchester D jars is they have a horizontal rilled decoration, so horizontal rilling all around the jar. And they said this would be to facilitate an easier grip. Because these jars are quite commonly found with soot on the outside, it heavily suggests that these were used as cooking pots, perhaps for some sort of greasy food. The rilling would make it easier to hold. The previous studies done on this fabric, the distribution. So the pot Bible, that is tires, now online at potcher.net, and this map is shown the accepted distribution, and we've got a kind of southeast confinement. We've got one kiln site identified on this map, which is the Overwey kilns, and yeah, so it's not further down to London. There's some to the south, and we've got an odd outlier, which I think is Chew Valley, which was identified by Malcolm Lyon. So in 2014, Annalane Timby reported that in Hampshire, in Kingsley, another kiln site that was producing Portchester D ware. So I know that this distribution map needs to be updated, at least with another kiln site. And I wanted to see if this distribution was still correct. And I am extremely grateful to the study group from Pottery, because they put a request out for me. And I got in touch with many pottery specialists, archaeology groups, who all trawled through their databases to find me new find spots or potential new find spots of this fabric. So after a while, this is the updated distribution map that I've come up with. So you can see that there is a much wider spread across southern England. Plotted the two kilns, Overwey and Kingsley. And this is just a simple distribution map. It's showing the Roman road network and the river system. So it does look quite busy, but the dots can easily show that we've got a much wider spread than there was previously thought. Distribution maps can only tell you so much. I've put a large blob on London because London is a very busy site. Lots of excavations going on there due to building work. I know that there's over 200 late Roman sites, and so it is fairly well represented. But this new distribution map will show that we've got lots more on the Isle of Wight, which wasn't previously thought, the western spread, and we've got a few almost odd outliers to the north. Well, as I say, distribution can only tell you so much. So when I was looking at the find spots, I was also looking for well-dated context, which is also a problem in itself because dating late Roman sites is difficult with the apparent decline in material culture. We've got a lack of coinage and we've got a lack of external dating evidence for these late sites. The spot to the left and at the north is Wroxeter. And Wroxeter is a really interesting site. Portchester D was found in the latest context above the Basilica and Bath complex. Although the dating there is in itself contested, it's unlikely to be before the early 5th century. So although productions of Portchester D is dated to the end of the 4th century, we're finding it in early 5th century and sometimes possibly later context. Pottery could be used for a very long time after its initial use as a cooking pot. It could also, if it wasn't heavily suited, somebody might use it as a, I don't know, a fancy flower pot or an umbrella stand or something. You know, pottery could be used in many different ways, not necessarily kept to the original function. So dating pottery itself is quite difficult, as well as dating late Roman sites. But the other northern outliers, the one to the right of the map, are in Cambridgeshire, and they are in other late contexts. So one's in Colnfen, in context dated to the late 4th century. But Evans and Lucy, who reported the pottery, suggested due to the presence of late Roman pottery, the supply and use continued well into the 5th century. We do also find Portchester D in infills of Grubenhauser in Muckin in Essex. So we definitely have a kind of continued presence or continued use of this fabric into the 5th century. The Colnfen report was also suggested that this fabric might have travelled from the kiln sites through the Saxon shore forts. So this is obviously represented at Portchester Castle, Saxon shore fort. But in my distribution, in my find spot, it's not represented at any other shore forts. However, it is on the Isle of Wight, so there is definitely some sort of sea travel. And actually, when I showed this map to a medieval pottery specialist just yesterday, he said it was very interesting that pottery is found, that the distribution shows that there's lots around the Portsmouth area. When this fabric was being in the initial stages of identification, they said that maybe it was the production site around Portchester Castle, which was supplying the shore fort. There hasn't been any production sites identified apart from the ones in Hampshire, but it is possible it travelled down there ready for the port to be transported by sea. Sorry, the medieval specialist said that you see the reverse continental pottery comes into Portsmouth rather than say that the capital of London, as it was when you go through Portsmouth, as you go north, it's the nearest crossing over the Thames. So, and there would be reverse trade there. So the pottery sites, kiln sites in Hampshire could possibly take advantage of the networks by travelling south to Portsmouth onto the Isle of Wight and maybe further sea trade. But distribution maps, they are quite limited. Another way of tracking pottery is by quantification. So I also had a look to see if we could do relative quantification assessment of Portchester D. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Another issue that that jumped out on the Cambridgeshire find spots is that this fabric is really, really similar to Overwey White Ware. In the Cambridgeshire area, we also have another similar industry at Manchester. Alice Lyons kindly pointed this out to me in her research at Manchester, that possibly that was potters from Verulamium producing similar fabric at Manchester. So we've got a lot of, in that area, we've got a lot of this whiteware, which could possibly be misidentified. Porcher D does have that diagnostic rilling, but if you have a body sherd that doesn't have the rilling, but you can't tell what vessel form it is, it might be, since it's outside of the previously accepted distribution area, it might possibly be misidentified. So that's another problem when looking straight at distribution. So then I looked at quantification, which was difficult in itself, as not everybody records the same way. Portchester D, it is a minority fabric. Although it might have a wide spread, it is found in very small quantities. These small quantities and, well, fluctuations have been theorized as possibly itinerant potters making pottery, traveling along the road networks, making odd bits of pot. And so I try to look at the quantification to test this theory. One of the most common ways for this fabric was to record by estimated vessel equivalents. But then this map, it doesn't really show. You would maybe expect to find lots more around the production area, but this map shows it does have a higher presence in London, but then that's because London's got a lot more sites. It shows a lot more at Wroxeter. Wroxeter produced 200 sherds, but this only equal to less than 1% of the full assemblage. The itinerant potter theory, the fluctuations, yes, possibly, but the clay itself could be easily transported, but I was advised that this white slip surely would have come from the red and clay beds. So was that easily to be transported, to be made like on the road by itinerant potters? I try to look at any other reasons to explain these fluctuations. And actually I went back to looking at the form and function of Portchester D. This is quite, as I say, it's got a white slip. It was quite unusual for the time. So the whole Alice Holt region primarily was producing grey ware. So Lyon and Jeffries noted the move to produce this white slipware was a definite decision to produce something new and I suppose that maybe it was catering for different markets, different cultural groups, and also possibly imitating other fabrics around that time. In particular, there's a South Midlands Harold ware, also with the rilled jars. So perhaps this was maybe a specialized jar for, and since it's a cooking pot, that maybe it was a specialized food product. I think it was mentioned earlier that pottery also acts as transportation. It could be packaging for produce. Because of the white, you would think of amphora with the white and the cream. Maybe it was used to transport a specialized food. Maybe it was catering for new ways of cooking, new tastes in food. It doesn't necessarily have to be for different cultural groups, because we'll have a lot more influences coming into the country, well, coming into Britain at all times. But maybe the fluctuations can be explained because it was so specialized. It didn't reach a quite popular market. But there was some people somewhere that were interested, that preferred this type of food or cooking. There is more research that I would like to do with this, because as well as the rilled jars, you do, and the three main jar, dish and bowl, you do find Portchester D vessels, and we find strainers and flagons, but they are very rare. And so far, I haven't put a map up, but so far only found close by to the production centre. So maybe the main output was this rilled storage, rilled cooking pot. But as they found a wider network, they started experimenting and making different vessels to cater for close by markets. And that is something I would like to take further. But the theory that maybe it was a specialized food product, also I'd like to research that more. What could this tell us about the late Roman pottery industry? And this is sort of a concluding overview, that Portchester D, it did see a wider distribution than was previously thought, but there are the problems with the misidentification in some areas, and vice versa. We have pottery specialists, we have all faith in, but if it's something that's considered unusual outside the area, it might possibly be misidentified or not recorded. If there was a wider distribution, this shows that the industry wasn't stagnant. It was at a time where, if it was the Alice Holt pottery industry, were trying new things and trying to cater for different markets. It was also trying, it was going with the times, I guess, and it wasn't just. And since we do get it in late context, and we can see a continued use over into the 5th century, that is there could be a case to make that maybe the industry didn't collapse at that point in 410, everyone says that end of Roman Britain, but maybe there's a case to be made that production did continue, and they just evolved and changed and catered to the market's need. And our next steps would be, I would like to do more fabric analysis of the kiln sites in particular, and the northern outliers, since we do get a lot of variations in the colour, with the potential misidentification if it's not a diagnostic rilled shade. I'd like to do more fabric analysis one day, and hopefully we can try and find more dated context to help build that case for continued use and production into the 5th century. I'd also like to do the full assemblage analysis. As I mentioned, the different vessel types of flagons and strainers, and assess against the wider assemblages to see if there was any reasons why these didn't, they were only confined to a close market. To take on, I'd like to look further at the potential sea trade. If it did go further than the Isle of Wight, we do get Alice Holt grey wares on the continent, but it's not seen as a major trade. It's just seen as a just maybe movement of people rather than trade. But I would like to maybe have a look at that to try and get to see if we do get possible Portchester D there. And this is a distant dream about food trace residue. If it was a specialised food product or specialised cooking, it will be difficult to find any food trace residue. And as I said, pottery could be used for all different purposes. So it would be really, really difficult to find out their original function. But technology is getting improving every day. So maybe, a distant hope. Finally, I just have to thank many, many people, Nico and James in particular. And these are just, I hope I haven't missed anybody out. If I have, I'm very sorry. The study group has been amazingly helpful, and all of the people that have took the time to discuss this with me and send their data. I'd really appreciate any questions. If anybody has any comments, my email's on the screen as well. And if you do have any more information that you could send me, that would be excellent. So thank you again.